Good afternoon and welcome to the People Power Lunch Hour Show. I'm your host, Vanessa Maria Graber, and we're broadcasting live on PhillyCam TV and on WPPM 106.5 FM. We're here in our Center City studios, and for the next hour, we're going to have a conversation with Irene Shin. She's the Political Director from CrowdPac, which is a fairly new organization that is interested in creating a more democratic environment by empowering citizens and increasing participation. We're going to talk about their online platform and all of their initiatives that are related to campaigns here in Philly and all across the country. The People Power Lunch Hour is a weekly talk show here on PhillyCam designed to empower and engage our citizens so they can talk about social issues, local organizing, social movements, and issues that matter to them. Stay tuned. We'll talk about CrowdPac and more on this edition of the People Power Lunch Hour. We'll be right back. All right, welcome back to the People Power Lunch Hour show here on PhillyCam. I'm Vanessa Maria Graber, and today I'm really excited to talk with Irene Shin. She is the Political Director of CrowdPac, which is an organization that was launched here in Philly. And what they want to do is fight the power of big money in politics by helping small donors engage in the political process. They want more citizens to vote and run for office, and they want to give people a platform to take action, whether it's by joining a community or organizing one of their own. They have different backgrounds, hailing from different countries, maintaining different political viewpoints, but they all share a common mission, which is strengthening democracy through citizen empowerment and participation. So we're going to talk all about their platform. Irene Shin's the Political Director. She's an experienced political operative and fundraiser, and she's worked for an array of campaigns and raised millions of dollars for candidates, national political committees, and political action funds. And she holds a BA in political science from the University of California, Riverside. Thank you so much for joining us, Irene.
Thanks for having me.
So tell us a little bit about CrowdPac. How did you get involved in this organization, and why are you excited about it?
You know, I got involved in CrowdPac. I started working for them in the summer of 2016. I come from a background of campaigns, and I've been a campaign and political operative for a while now. And I was really excited about CrowdPac because they're trying to change the way that fundraising occurs in the political space. It's really, really hard for candidates to decide to close that ambition gap of I want to run for office and then actually running for office. One of the biggest barriers that we see for candidates is fundraising, because fundraising is such an intimidating thing to even think about. When you're talking about running for state legislature, you have to think, I have to raise $100,000, $200,000, $300,000 to run for a local state level office. And that can be really, really daunting for folks. And what I love about CrowdPac now, and what I did then, was that we help people to kind of close that gap and figure out how to make fundraising more attainable, more accessible, and lower that barrier of entry, which is so important, especially for representatives or candidates who are interested in running for office, coming from communities of color or marginalized communities that are not normally politically engaged or outside of that kind of traditional political pipeline.
So it is a website. You can go online to crowdpac.com. And you can create an account and then begin to engage with the website. Can you tell our viewers and listeners a little bit how the website, what it's like? How do you interact with it? And what are some of the useful tools?
Definitely. So I'm actually going to talk a little bit about the history of where we started with CrowdPac and how we've evolved. CrowdPac initially began sort of with the idea in mind that we would educate voters about their elected officials. We calculated scores, political scores for candidates and incumbents based on who they were receiving money from, who they were giving money to, because we thought that it was inevitable that when you're receiving money or influence from someone, that's going to affect how your elected officials are voting in office on legislation and policy and what they're campaigning for and who they're advocating for. And so we started as a voter information resource to try and educate voters on who they are voting for, who's on their ballot, who their incumbents are. And then since then, so you talked a little bit about how we launched in Philly, and one of our early partnerships was with the Committee of 70, where we worked on voter information resources to make sure that the citizens of Philadelphia had access to an online ballot. They could share with them, share with their friends and people in their social networks who they were going to be voting for, who they should be voting for, things like that. And so since then, we've seen the evolution of CrowdPac as a platform to also become a crowdfunding platform. We're really excited about that because I think crowdfunding is something that's relatively new in the tech space, and people have not engaged before in politics in a crowdfunding way, right? You think about crowdfunding for a movie on Kickstarter, but you don't, or, on GoFundMe, when you're like, oh, I'm going to help that dog who has a broken leg in whatever city. And that's kind of what you think about when you think about crowdfunding. But crowdfunding is also the power of like small dollar people donations. And so we thought CrowdPac is in our larger mission of taking big money out of politics, we wanted to empower citizens to become more engaged in the political process by becoming donors, whether that's $5 or $10 or a max out federal contribution of $2,700, right? We wanted people to be more engaged and have access to become, to enter that arena.
So say I would like to run for office.
Yes.
But I have no money, like many people. I have no money to fund a campaign. How could I use this website? Like, what are the steps?
Yeah, so the CrowdPac platform is actually really easy to access. One of the most amazing tools, in my opinion, is that we offer the ability for people who are interested in running for office, like you might be, to test their financial network. So you can start collecting pledges from your friends, from your family to say, hey, I'm thinking about running for office. Would you give me money if I were to run? Because often it's like the case of, what comes first, the chicken or the egg, right? Do I need to raise money first, or do I need to decide I'm going to run for office first? And based on, am I going to have the financial viability to make a run for office or a viable run for office? So I think we have this amazing feature where you can start running for office without necessarily having filed paperwork or declared that you are officially running. You can start running by collecting pledges from your friends and family to say, I need to raise $10,000 to make a viable bid for a city council. Maybe it's mayor, whatever it is. And you send around a CrowdPac page. You go on, you log in. It literally takes 4 minutes to set up a page. And I can confirm that it really only takes 4 minutes because I've done it. And so it makes it so easy for you to say, I'm thinking about running for office. Let me share this around with my friends and family and see if they would be willing to support me and how much I could raise. And when you hit that mark, or maybe you don't hit that mark, whatever happens, you can say, okay, great. I raised $10,000. I'm in. I'm going to run. And at that point, everybody's credit cards get charged. Or you can say, you know what, I didn't raise the money that I thought I could. And also maybe another contender came in who I think is really qualified and I don't feel the need to run for this office. I think will be really well represented by someone else. And you can say, I'm not going to run. And nobody's credit cards are charged. You didn't actually charge someone and have to return money to them. I think it makes that process really easy for you to explore the idea of running.
And then you kind of figure out, why doesn't anyone want to fund my campaign for office?
Yes.
Go back to, some of that organizing work.
Totally.
So there's a really great event happening, which is how I first found out about CrowdPac. And again, you're partnering with Committee of 70, which if you don't know, the Committee 70 is another really great nonprofit organization here in Philly. It provides a great website that gives you all the information about all the candidates, gives you sample ballots. And if you're like, oh, there's an election coming up and I don't really know who's running, that's a good place to start because it will list all the candidates and link to their sites and stuff like that. And then Philadelphia 3.0 as well. So there's a boot camp happening on November 29th designed to teach citizens how to run for office and win in the digital age. And it'll feature a panel of experts who will walk citizens through the process of exploring a campaign, as you said, and showcase new technology that's helped thousands of first-time candidates run for office across the country. And so this press release says that CrowdPac's platform has been credited with helping Representative Chris Rabb, who's from Mount Airy, defeat an incumbent in the 2016 election. And it's helping other people like Chris Rabb run campaigns across Pennsylvania. And so, Chris Rabb was a newbie. He wasn't really, he was somebody that we had interacted with here at PhillyCam and the fight for net neutrality. And he was an activist and a professor at Temple. And he decided to run. Mm-hmm. And so it was really amazing that he actually won against the incumbent congressperson in his district. And then he went on to defeat the Republican. So there's real potential for people like Chris Rabb and your average citizen to really challenge the people that are in office?
Yeah, definitely. I think especially like Chris Rabb is a great example because he was kind of outside the traditional political pipeline, right? A lot of the times in political spaces, like in cities or in counties, you already have a structure where you're like recruiting your next candidate. They've already designated who's going to run next for what seat. And for Chris Rabb, who was not part of that system and who was not part of that traditional pipeline, he was able to viably say, like, I'm going to raise some money and see if I could do this thing. And then he raised almost 10K and then was like, oh, like I could mount a real credible bid. And he did. And, you know, he not only defeated, like you said, the incumbent, he like went on to defeat the Republican, and now he's in the state house of Pennsylvania, which is just amazing. And he's a great use case for us.
Yeah, but it doesn't just take money. To Chris Rabb's credit, he did a lot of community organizing,
Totally.
knocking on doors, attending meetings, and he was like really, really out there. So not only do you have to raise money, but you have to be out there interacting with the citizens.
Definitely. And he was also like well known in his community, right? People knew him and they liked him. And that was, I think, really evident in the kind of campaign he ran. And then obviously being able to beat the incumbent.
Yeah, so it takes a lot of different ingredients. So again, if you're interested in running for office and you want to learn more about some of these tools, you can go on Wednesday, November 28th.
29th.
29th. Pipeline, Philadelphia, and it's from 5:30 to 8 p.m. and it is free and open to the public. So again, I'll give that information again towards the end of our show. But these are the types of events that we're interested in here at PhillyCam because this show is all about civic engagement, right? And organizing and getting people to take action. And as I was telling you before the show started, the People Power Lunch Hour was formed after the election because people were having very strong feelings after last year's election on social media. And we wanted to bring people on like yourself to have more constructive conversations and solutions for what can be done to kind of challenge the systems of power that be. So, being that as May, since the last election, have you seen a lot more people come out and say, I think I want to run?
Absolutely. Yes. The answer, like the short answer is yes, and the long answer is also yes. We have seen women, millennials, people of color from different communities step up to run for office, and it's been so exciting to be on the back end of CrowdPac to see all these candidates start on CrowdPac from folks who are not your traditional politician type, right? They're not your lawmaker, they're not your lawyer, they're not people who have done this 5 times before, right? Who have risen into a different office starting at the bottom or a different office or a lower level office. And one of the most exciting things for us is we get to work, or for me specifically, I get to work with a ton of candidates who are women, who are young people, who are 25, 26, 27 years old and running for office for the first time. And a lot of it has to do with Trump, right? He is, in a sense, the gift that keeps on giving because he is the reason, that impetus behind all of these people who are stepping up to run for office.
With each tweet comes a new candidate for office.
No, totally. And when I talk about non-traditional candidates, I mean there's a volcanologist running in California against a Republican incumbent, and she's a scientist. We have almost 8 or 9 congressional candidates who are all women physicians, and they're all raising incredible amounts of money. And people are like, if you're going to talk about my healthcare, I want my doctor to be a part of that conversation. And these women who are physicians are like, we are going to be a part of that conversation, and we want to be sure that we're advocating for the right decisions to be made that are affecting so many Americans. And so, I mean, it runs the whole gamut. There are so many people who are stepping up to run for office, and it is incredible how many of them are your non-traditional old white men, right?
Yeah, no, it's true. I mean, that's not a stereotype. If you look at local, state, federal offices, you look at the courts, it is dominated by older white men. And that's not necessarily reflective of American demographics, right? We have a very diverse, multicultural populace. And there seems to be a disconnect if the people who are holding these positions of power are not reflective of the people who are actually in or make up the society.
Absolutely. I think one of the most recent stories that I'm sure you've read about Virginia. I live in Virginia, so Virginia is near and dear to my heart, and I have been so amazed by the election results that came out of Virginia. Of the 15 seats that we've won thus far in the House of Delegates, the majority of candidates who won were first-time candidates who stepped up after the election in November because they were like, this is not okay, right? Like, this isn't my country. This isn't what I want our state to stand for. And so we have candidates like Danica Rome. We have candidates like Carrie Delaney, Kathy Tran, Hala Ayala, Elizabeth Guzman, Hala and Elizabeth were both elected, and they'll be the first Latinas in the Virginia state legislature. So, like, I mean, they are making history, and it's because of
Herstory.
Yes, no, totally. And it's been incredible to watch and just like see all that. And I can't wait for 2018 when you've got elections all across the country, and to see the kind of turnout and the kind of candidates that'll step up to run for these local offices, whether it's state legislature or school board or city council, mayor. In Montana, we elected the first Black mayor. And he was a CrowdPac candidate. And he's a refugee from Liberia who came to the States 23 years ago. And he ran basically against like anti-refugee rhetoric. And he won, and he's the first Black mayor of Montana, which I think is, again, amazing when you think about the elected officials who should be representative of their communities.
A lot of what happened in the latest election was like a reaction or a direct response. Like with some of the women, they heard misogynist, sexist comments by some of those leaders, and they decided like this is unacceptable. The transgender woman who ran again against the candidate who was like the architect of the Virginia transgender bathroom law that was extremely oppressive. And then similarly in other parts of the country, you saw other women, people of color, again, directly responding to policies that were made. Here in Philadelphia, I would say the last two elections, with the election of Helen Gim as a city council person who also ran a grassroots campaign. She was a mother who was heavily involved in this fight for education. And so again, thought, what, I want to say in this. She ran. And then Larry Krasner, again, got about 75% of the vote here. So something is changing, right, in this country. And I think y'all have kind of your finger on that pulse.
Definitely we do. And I think, we talked about how easy it is to decide to explore your run for office on CrowdPac. And we've had a ton of candidates who have decided, like, I'm going to start running and see if I can gain support before I decide to run. And that's, I think, why we have our pulse on it so much, because like we see these candidates firsthand before they actually enter the race. One of my favorite examples to use is Kathy Allen, who unfortunately just lost her congressional bid in Utah's 3rd district. That was the seat held by Jason Chaffetz. And she went to a town hall and came back and was like, I'm so mad. Like, that's my congressman, and I'm like so mad about it. She's like, so I'm going to start a CrowdPac campaign and see if I could maybe make a real thing of this. In 2 weeks, she raised something like 15 or 20K from her friends and family. They were like, yeah, you should run, because she's also a doctor. And they're like, you should run, like, totally. And they put their money where their mouth is. And so she had raised $20,000 in pledges. A couple weeks goes by, Jason Chaffetz goes on TV and says, poor people should stop buying iPhones and they should start buying healthcare instead. And it was like, wait, what? Like that. So he makes this huge gaffe on public national TV, and there's a reaction on Twitter, right? And so people find Kathy's page and they start pledging money to her, and they say, if you run, like, I will give you money. And within 48 hours, she like literally picked up steam organically, went viral, and she went from having $20,000 to having $60,000 in pledges. And then she was like, okay, I could do this, I'm in. And she declared her bid for Congress, and she was officially a candidate. And then Rachel Maddow picked up her story and was like, look how amazing this candidate is. She's a female doctor from Utah in a heavily red district who felt the urge so strongly to serve and step up for her country that she's like running for office. And within 72 hours or so, she went from having 60K to having 450K in pledges or in contributions. And so, I mean, it shows you like you have to be ready for moments in this weird new political era that we're in with the current president. And moments are so fast now, right? News cycles don't last as long as I feel like they used to. So when something happens, like a congressman says, you should stop buying iPhones and pay for your healthcare instead, you have to be ready to react immediately. And Kathy was there, and like she was able to kind of catch the momentum and like ride that wave out to $450,000. And so I think one of the great things about CrowdPac is we allow for that, right? Like when you're ready to run, or if there's something happening in your city, in your town, in your county, and you're like, I need to run because of this, you can start a page, like I said, in 4 minutes. So like I think that's an incredible asset to have right now in this weird climate that we're in.
Yeah, anybody can run for office,
Totally.
As long as you're a U.S. citizen, I think that's why America is so exciting. People like a Barack Obama, born and raised in Hawaii and Chicago, and who comes from a diverse background, became a U.S. president. That's totally attainable, but I think most people start at the local level, right? And then kind of like work their way up. If you're just tuning in, you're watching and listening to the People Power Lunch Hour show here at Philly Cam, and also on WPPM 106.5 FM. I'm Vanessa Maria Graber, and I've been talking with Irene Shin, and she is the Political Director of CrowdPac, which is an organization that provides online tools and a platform for people who would like to run for office and engage in the political process. So there are a variety of other campaigns I noticed on the website, and not everybody is running for office. I saw Arnold Schwarzenegger has a campaign to end gerrymandering. So what are some of the other things people can do that are political actions, but not everybody wants to run for office?
Yeah, so the Arnold Schwarzenegger campaign is actually a great campaign because I think it crosses that partisan aisle, right? You're talking about bipartisanship and talking about fair districts in your states. And he's raising funds to help pay for the current gerrymandering case in front of the Supreme Court. He's helping to pay for like the lawyers and the attorney fees that go into that. And we've found that the donors who are interested in giving to that campaign are like from across the spectrum. They're Republicans, they're Democrats, they're independents, they're Green Party candidates or Green Party donors because they're like, this is important to us as American and in America's democracy, not just as a party or a partisan. Other campaigns that we've seen are things like the District 13 house, which was a campaign to pay for a house in front of the White House. And people were going to rent this house and train activists and organizers to resist. And so they raised a ton of money. And there's so many different ways in which to engage and become a political donor that it doesn't necessarily have to be just to a candidate. We had a group of filmmakers who wanted to go out to Virginia this past election cycle to help record digital video ads for some of the candidates running and help elevate their stories. And they raised $35,000 on our site because they were like, we are people powered, right? They wanted to say like, we're going to go out there and record videos. And it was an all-female team of filmmakers who went out and shot amazing videos for candidates in Virginia to like tell their story in a way that's, political ads are sometimes really boring to watch on TV. And so I think with the new take on, with this new like infusion of talent and people who are interested in politics after the November elections, that included these filmmakers who were like, why are we telling stories of these candidates who are so diverse and like so dimensional in this like really flat political way? Like, let's tell their stories in like a narrative, as a narrative. And they went and did that. And all of the candidates that they supported won, actually. So
that's pretty amazing. And those ads, some of them are just like the worst, and they're pretty cookie cutter. A lot of them, it's
Definitely.
like the person with their family, like walking in the park and like, there's an American flag waving behind or something like that. I definitely agree that it's much more interesting to tell people's real stories, real backgrounds, especially if they're not like a traditional political type.
Definitely.
One of the other campaigns I saw, it didn't have that many members. It looked fairly new. But again, it's things that like I'm interested in, it said diversify Hispanic leadership or something like that. And you clicked on it and it's like, let's try to get more Hispanic people, Latino people in office and positions of leadership. And I thought that was interesting. But there's a lot of different campaigns that, like I said, are not all people running for office. So you can check that out. There's a couple other really neat tools on the website. So one of them, you can take a little test. Well, one of the things it says engage with the tools or the data, right? Because there's a lot of data on this website,
Yes.
right? It's data driven. One of the founders is like formerly from Google, right? Yeah. So, the master data collector. And so you can enter your name and it will tell you how conservative or liberal your name is. So, of course, my name is Vanessa. And it said that 1,100 names are more conservative than Vanessa, including Jackie, Melinda, and Tamara. So that's interesting. And then it also said only 23 names were more liberal than Vanessa, Rosalind, Eve, and Abigail. So I thought that was kind of like a fun activity, just to kind of like place you on the scale. So this is basically made up of like data and algorithms.
Yeah, so we calculate that score based on other donors that we have in our database. So it basically means 1,100 of those names who are more conservative than your name are folks who have given to conservative causes or to conservative candidates. And like, so we kind of gauge where you might fall in that scale.
It also said something funny. It said Vanessa, people with the name Vanessa are less likely to contribute to a campaign than the average citizen.
Is that true?
I will neither confirm or deny that fact, but I definitely giggled when I saw that. So we're gonna take a short break in a little bit. Again, this is People Power Lunch Hour here on Philly Cam and on WPPM 106.5 FM. We've been talking with Irene Shin, and she is with CrowdPac, which is a pretty cool website and organization which is interested in a common mission, strengthening democracy through citizen empowerment and participation. They have a really great event coming up. They're partnering with the Committee of 70 and Philadelphia 3.0. And it is about crowdfunding your run for office, how to crowdfund your campaign and win in the digital age. It's taking place Wednesday, November 29th of this year from 5:30 p.m. to 8 p.m. at Pipeline, Philadelphia, which is at 30 South 15th Street on the 15th floor. And it is free, but you have to RSVP because space is limited. All right, we're going to take a short break. And when we come back, we'll talk more with Irene and learn more about CrowdPac. Keep it locked here. You're listening to WPPM 106.5 FM and watching on Philly Cam. Hey, welcome back to the People Power Lunch Hour show. I'm your host, Vanessa Maria Graber, and I'm joined in the studio by Irene Shin. She's the Political Director of CrowdPac, which is an organization that was launched in 2015 in Philadelphia. That is really trying to engage citizens and help them run for office by providing a crowdfunding tool. And so hence the name CrowdPac. So in the last half hour, we've been talking about the website and how people can interact with it. And for those of you who are interested in running for office, this is one way that you can fund your campaign. So again, just to kind of reiterate, if you're just joining us, what CrowdPac does, they provide a platform. And so there's many different ways that you can engage and interact with the website. But really their common mission is strengthening democracy through citizen empowerment and participation. And some of their values include being radically inclusive, being objective, being transparent, and protective. And so the website is data-based, and there are a lot of tools on the website that you can use to check the donors of different candidates running for office, to start your own crowdfunding campaign, and to interact with like different people and issues, because you create like a user profile, correct?
Yes.
And so there's an issues page, which I looked at with these really cool little comic strips. I don't know if you can see this, but they're really fun. And you basically can click on them and learn more about the issues. And this is great because, you know, it's okay if you don't know, right? You know, if you want to learn, this is a great place to start. If you're like, you know what, I really don't know a lot about the gun issue. I don't know a lot about education. You can go on this website and kind of learn both stances. So they have abortion, banking and finance, defense and foreign policy, economy, education, climate change, environmentalism. And so these are all the topics that are hot button topics right now. So can you tell us a little bit about the issues page and what they kind of contain?
Yeah, definitely. So you kind of talked about the different issues that we do have: abortion, climate change, gun control, etc. And the issues page was really, like you said, designed to help people get a better sense of what the issues that they care about are, right? Because it's okay that you don't know, that you don't have to know exactly what policy is being voted on the Hill, or you just have to like have an idea of like what is it that you care about before you can decide who to vote for or whether you want to run for office. And so that page is really there as an education resource for our users. And then we also break it down by issue from so one of the things that we used to do at CrowdPac is provide scores for the incumbents or for candidates running based on an evaluation and analysis of the donors that have given money to them and the donors that they have given money to, and like who have they been a donor to. And we're kind of moving away from that model because it was quite truthfully just a little bit confusing, I think, for people. They were like, what is a score and how am I getting it? And so we're moving away from that model. But we're still using issue scores and things like that on internally to figure out where does your name fall as a liberal or a conservative. And so these issue scores were also used to kind of calculate for our users how their incumbents or how the people on their ballot fell on what issue. Like, were they pro-choice or were they pro-life? Were they for or against gun control, et cetera, et cetera.
Especially if they're a new candidate and they don't have that voting record. Because that's another way you can tell. You can go to your government website, you know, whether it's state or local government, federal government, and it should show your candidates and how they vote. But if it's a newer candidate and you're not, especially if it's someone you didn't vote for and you don't really know a lot about them, this is probably a good way to kind of find out where they fall.
Definitely. Yes.
So there's another test you can take, or assessment, I should say, and you can find out what your political personality type is. Now, you know, if you're a little bit older, you might already know. But if you're 18, you're a first-time voter, you really don't know where you fall on the issues, you don't know what party to choose. Because when you register to vote, they ask you right away, like, what party. And
do you have voter registration or party registration in Philadelphia?
I believe when you go to the election or board of elections, they ask you what party, because that will dictate whether or not you can vote in the primaries.
Oh, because you all have closed primaries.
Yes,
Sorry.
exactly. So if you're a third party candidate, they won't let you vote in some of the primaries. And so there's a bit of pressure for you on the spot to choose a party. I mean, you can always choose independent or unaffiliated, but then you can't vote in the primaries. And so if you're wondering, where do I fall on the spectrum? You can take a little assessment, and it asks you a series of questions about different issues. And it's on kind of like a Likert scale. It's like strongly disagree, neutral to like strongly agree. And then you can find out like where you fall on the political spectrum. And so I won't tell you what I got. You can probably guess. But I'll tell you the people that they associated me with, which is Elizabeth Warren, Bernie Sanders, George Clooney, and Jesse Williams.
I will happily take an association with George Clooney and Jesse Williams.
Totally. Totally. And so they kind of tell you like how you fall on the spectrum and like what it means. So I thought that was like pretty cool. No big surprises there for me. But again, if you're new to politics, you're a first time voter, you don't know a lot about the issues, but you do have opinions on things. I find that most people still have an opinion, even if they're not 100% sure on the issues. You can take an assessment for your political personality type and learn more about how you lean. So I wanted to ask you a little bit about your experience, because you've been raising money and you've been involved in elections and candidates for quite some time. In your experience, how has money traditionally been raised for candidates? Obviously, that's changing now with these crowdsourced tools and social media, but kind of talk about the evolution of that.
Yeah, definitely. So I think, if we talk about pre-online fundraising, the traditional methods of raising money were through your personal networks. A candidate would decide, I'm going to run for office, and they would host a fundraiser at their house or at a friend's house, and all of their close friends would just come and cut checks. Very old school. I don't know that I even have a checkbook, but
I don't have a checkbook either.
So it was very much that's how it is. And actually, a lot of candidates still continue to raise money in large checks, personal checks. And I think with the advent of technology and the internet just being ubiquitous, and also like the ease of being able to donate online from your phone, from home, without having to write, cut, mail a check to someone. You can just go online and do it. And so that shift is definitely, I think like we're like right in the midst of that shift right now, where we're seeing candidates who normally used to raise from their family, their friends, their uncle, their next door neighbor. And now we're seeing that people who are interested in a candidate because they align with them and their values, because they are a candidate in a state, maybe it's their home state, who's running for office based on climate control, or who really is passionate about being pro-choice. And these are the candidates that they want to support. And they'll say like, oh, I can support that candidate. I have no actual personal relationship to them, but I agree with their values and I want to see them elected into office. And so I think CrowdPac plays a huge role in that, because you talked about this crowdfunding aspect and how we're changing that fundraising paradigm. And it's through one of the things that we're working on really hard this year is to be able to match donors to candidates or political elected officials who are like right in their alley, right? Like we are really interested in helping candidates or incumbents find a donor base outside of their personal network. We want to try and encourage folks to get involved in the process through donations, or through just civic engagement by voting or being an organizer in your community. But for the donation, for like the fundraising part of it, we're definitely seeing a huge shift right now. And part of it, I can 100% say CrowdPac is a huge part of that.
Yeah, I would say like it began with Howard Dean when he ran
Yes.
For president. He really was the first one who capitalized on the online, like small donations fundraising. And then Obama took it like a step further.
Totally.
Right. But that model, that infrastructure was already there. And then Bernie Sanders, being that he was, focused on money out of politics, et cetera, asked for the even like small, like $3 and $5 donations.
$27 average.
Yeah, exactly. And so that's changing too, right?
Yeah.
Making it affordable for anybody to contribute.
Absolutely. I also think that what we're seeing now is that people are tired of those emails that they're getting from their establishment parties, right? Like the sky is falling. I need you to give $5 right now. And it's like people are just getting tired of that. They used to give to those emails, and now they're like, the sky is not actually falling anymore, right? And they want to give. They want to be impactful investors in campaigns. They want to give money to candidates that they want to that will be elected, that will represent their values, and that they'll get a return on investment on. They don't want to just give $5 to whatever and not know where that money is going towards. And I think that CrowdPac is a great way in which we, provide a direct line of communication between candidate and donor, whether that donor is from their personal network or not. We have really great tools like the update tool, where you can send an update to every single one of your donors in like one fell swoop.
That's kind of like GoFundMe. Like if you, I learned that like half of GoFundMe's last year were for medical expenses, which is, I don't know if that's good or bad. You all can decide. I think it's good that people are willing to support that, but a little bit sad that that's, people need to fundraise for that. But the update tool is pretty cool because you can say, hey, I just had my surgery. It went well. Like now I'm in recovery. I was able to do that thanks to your donations.
Yes, absolutely.
And that, and I actually contributed to a campaign where it was exactly that. And I felt like, oh, wow. And I didn't give very much. I gave like what I could. But it still felt like, oh, wow, like we all together were able to provide this person with this life-saving surgery. And it does make you feel good.
Yes. I am that person who also gives on GoFundMe, but I give to like animal medical expenses. I'm like the puppy who broke their rib because they got run over by a car. And when they send updates like, our puppy is doing so much better and here's a picture, I'm like, yes, we're having an impact. And I think that that's the same. I don't know why we would expect anything different from political donors, right? They want to know that they're having an impact and making a difference.
Well, yeah, especially if you win, right?
Totally. Absolutely.
But I think there's something to be said too when you run a campaign that's transparent and legitimate and grassroots, and it's still empowering. And I think that some of these campaigns really launch people into community leadership positions.
Totally. I would talk specifically about one candidate who ran on CrowdPac last year. He ran as a write-in candidate in 2016 against Javier Becerra. In early 2017, Javier Becerra was appointed the Attorney General of California and left a congressional seat open in Los Angeles, one of the most diverse districts in California. And the candidate who ran, his name's Kenneth, and Kenneth is a 26-year-old. And it was his first time running for office, and he ran as a Green Party candidate. And he raised $50,000 from something like 1,200 different donors. And when we did an analysis of his contributions, it was like something like 60 or 70% of his donors were students. Like that was what they wrote in their occupation section. And it's like when you think about how much money you can raise because of crowdfunding, you can crowdfund your campaign. It's really incredible to see that and to engage someone in a really in the political process in a way that's accessible with a $5, a $10, or $27 contribution. I think that makes it so much easier and easy to understand for people. Like I can be a political donor, but you don't have to give $2,700 or $33,000.
Yeah, and it offers a real challenge to incumbents, right?
1,000%, yes.
We don't need super PACs and dark money.
Totally.
We can take $5 from every student out there and run a legitimate campaign.
And you don't have to be appointed or anointed by the traditional political structures, right? You don't have to have a party to back you entirely. But I talk about Kenneth specifically because his race really catapulted him into a leadership position in the LA community and in the Green Party community specifically in LA. And it's been so refreshing to see that he's, the child of an immigrant family, and I have been so inspired by his candidacy and his campaign, and like the truly grassroots campaign that he ran.
Yeah, because I feel once you get your name out there, you say, I represent this, and I'd like to change this. Even if you lose, there's still those people who support you, right? Mm-hmm. And so why not ride the wave and use that platform to do the other types of organizing? Not all organizing is through an elected position, right?
Absolutely.
You can still do a lot within the community, even if you lose a race. But those races, they give you that platform. Mm-hmm. And I'll give one example, and that's when N.A. Poe ran for city council here in Philadelphia during a special election. And he was, the Libertarian Party nominated him. And that campaign was specifically designed not necessarily to win, But knowing that being a candidate gives you access to the media and access to press, and that campaign allowed him to put forth marijuana legalization and decriminalization in the spotlight. And just for those 2 months of the election, that issue dominated so much press coverage that later on it did lead to more public opinion polls, and then eventually it being decriminalized here in Philadelphia. And so again, you can run and lose, but it's not entirely a loss. Like you can kind of take advantage of that opportunity because now you have all these people who support you, who support this issue, who probably would come to an event. And also, I think one of the things he did, all the people that were supporting him for his candidacy were also willing to call city council and call the mayor's office and express their support. So people who are willing to donate are, I'm guessing, more likely to be civically engaged too.
Definitely. I think that that's right. And you talk about, running for office giving you a platform. And even if you do lose, you now have a community of people who have rallied behind you before and understand your values and are willing to support you in the next endeavor you have, right? So I would say even if you run and you lose, you should definitely run again.
Some of the things that people are really concerned about, again, are these like shady super PACs you don't know much about. They're injecting money into races. It's hard to trace where it's coming from. Is it coming from billionaires? Is it coming from corporations? And they've kind of, using Citizen United, circumvented the process for transparency. This is an alternative to that, right? Because if all of your money is raised, or the majority of it is raised through this crowdfunding site, anybody can kind of see where that money comes from. Is that right?
That's right. And for political campaigns, they are held to a different level of transparency than a super PAC might be. Campaigns, for the most part, have to report who their donors are and how much their donors have given, and that's all public information. And so we talk about the difference between like dark money and like what we call light money. There are some groups that have cropped up since the November election in 2016, like the Sister District Project. And basically what they do is they take money and energy and resources in these deeply blue districts and channel them into really purple districts where they can make a difference and have an impact. For example, Lee Carter, who just won his election in Virginia to the House of Delegates, he's a Democratic Socialist. And he's like the first DSA or Democratic Socialist elected in the state legislature in Virginia, which is incredible. And 21% of his budget came from the Sister District Project volunteers who chipped in $5, $10, $25 to help him win that election. And so we talk about like the difference between light money and dark money. And I think it's so encouraging to see how small dollar light money contributions can make such an impact, such as helping to win the seat for a Democratic Socialist in Virginia. It's really incredible. And the platform he ran on was, healthcare for all and Medicaid expansion in Virginia. And like that message not just resonated with his constituents and the voters of that district, but it also resonated so much with other people in the country that they all chipped in to send him money to make sure he could win that seat.
Yeah, and let's be honest, like a lot of the people in office, owe a quote unquote debt to their big donors, right? They, accept money from different industries and special interests, and then that inevitably affects the policies and laws that they vote for. And so when you run a campaign that's grassroots, that's people powered, that's transparent, you don't have that same debt or that power over you.
Absolutely. If you got to take contributions from people who believed in your platform and your policy proposals, that's all you're beholden to, right? You're accountable to yourself and to the promises you've made to the people that elected you and gave you money. And it's not necessarily a big special interest.
Right. Yeah. And I think that is like the thing that people are concerned about, right? We're contributing to these traditional candidates, but yet they're not really doing what we're electing them to do. And again, it all has to do with money in politics and a lot of these super PACs, and then kind of going around the traditional model. And then come these people powered candidates who are like, we don't need that money. We got our own money. And we are truly beholden to the citizens, as it should be. And then, that sometimes can even split the party. And it's real, they're people that have been holding a seat for a long time. The party supports that person because they know they can deliver. And then a person, and I'll even say like Chris Rabb comes along who says, No, I'm here to shake things up. And I think it's really exciting because as a voter, it's really tiring to see the same people run over and over and over again and sort of feeling hopeless like, how can we get them out of here? Like, if I switch parties and that other party, I don't really support them either. You know what I mean?
Definitely. I think one of the things we saw in Virginia was there were some incumbents who had been in office for 20 years and run unopposed all 20 years. And it was like, no incumbent should feel comfortable enough to run unopposed for 20 years, right? And I think when Democrats or Republicans, whoever it is, when they have a choice on the ballot, they're more likely to come out and vote on election day. So part of getting voter turnout higher is to make sure that there are choices on the ballot on election day. And I think that's why it's so important for people to decide to run for office. Even if you think you're going to lose, you just never know. I mean, in Virginia, we picked up 15 seats in the House of Delegates, and no one thought that was just an impossible reach, and we did it. So you just got to run.
Are you curious to see what happens in Alabama?
I'm so curious. Also, Roy Moore is a terrible human being.
I mean, with these allegations, not talking about him specifically, most of the time it's always more than one person that steps forward, and that's been happening, right? Many more people have stepped forward. But it's interesting because there's a lot of talk about a write-in campaign. And so, like you said, there's moments, right? This is a moment, I would say, if you're someone out there, especially if you're a Republican in Alabama, and the party doesn't want, I would say the Alabama party doesn't seem like they want to support anybody else. The governor even came out and backed him. Which was surprising to me because she's a woman. And but there is an opportunity to still be a write-in candidate, I believe.
Yeah, I think that's possible. I think it probably...
well...
I guess we'll see.
If he steps aside, then they would have to put up a write-in. So there's talk about Jeff Sessions coming in, which is, again, another one of those candidates that's been in office forever.
And ever.
And ever. It won't go away. But you can still write yourself in as an independent or anything like that. I mean, this is a real tool to get your name out there and get that money.
Yes, absolutely. I will let you know if we have any write-in candidates that start a campaign on CrowdPac.
Alabama, this is your opportunity. 4 minutes, you can start a profile and challenge Senator Moore. But, that's why it's exciting, right? Because there are many more candidates like him where people, I can't tell you about the local landscape in Alabama, but I can say nationally there are big questions about why somebody like him is being allowed to run again. And so challenge him, right? Run. I think there's lots of candidates like this. And 2018 is going to be huge. So let's talk about that as we wrap up the show, the midterm elections. What are your thoughts on this? And are you already seeing people step forward to run for 2018?
Gosh. Yes. We've had so many candidates step up to run. We talked a little bit about the women physicians who are running for office, and they're all running in 2018 races. So they're all stepping up to run for Congress in California, in North Carolina, everywhere. And it's been amazing to watch. We have a pediatrician running in Maryland to replace John Delaney for 2018. There's a ton of candidates who are stepping up to run for 18 already. And I think we've seen it. They started sooner than we've ever seen before. Immediately after the election in 2016, we had people come to CrowdPac and say, I'm stepping up to run for office. And it was just unbelievable. It's like nothing I've ever seen before. They start so early. Usually for a 2018 election, you might see candidates start to announce, mid to end 2017. Fall of 2017 seems about appropriate. And this year, we saw people starting in January. They were just like, nope, I'm done. I'm in.
Inauguration day, people were like, okay, we're doing something.
No, totally. So it's been amazing. I can't wait for 2018. If we see anything similar to what happened in Virginia, where there was just a huge wave of turnout, people who've never voted before were like, I'm going to vote because I need my voice to be heard. I hope that we get to see that just scaled across the country, and hopefully we'll see a lot of incumbents have a real run for their money.
Yeah, and what I would like to see is a more representative democracy that is reflective of the diversity, multiculturalism here in the United States, and more women, right?
1,000% yes. 40% of candidates who are running for 2018 on CrowdPac are women.
That's awesome.
It's so amazing.
I'm excited. We definitely have to keep in touch because the 2018 races are going to be huge. It's going to be very competitive. It's going to dominate a lot of the news. And I'm excited to see what happens. Will big changes come? Will stuff stay the same? We don't know.
We'll have to see what happens, especially in the primaries, because so many primaries are happening. Because so many Democrats have said, I'm going to run for office, but you've got like a crowded primary and you're like, oh, great, we all have options now.
Yeah, that would be super interesting. Again, I want to thank Irene Shin for coming on the People Power Lunch Hour show. You've been really informative.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure.
So again, she is from CrowdPac organization. They have a really great website. Will you tell them the website name?
Yes, it's crowdpac.com. And when you log on, the very first thing you should see is an invitation to our event happening on the 29th, 5:30 to 8 p.m. at Pipeline, Philadelphia. You can always reach me, Irene, at crowdpac.com. If you have questions about running for office, I am here to help.
All right, Philly people, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, there's a lot of seats up for grabs, especially in 2018. If you want to make a difference in your community, or if you just want to have a platform for your issues and your voice, run for office. You can do it. Again, the event is called Crowdfund Your Run for Office, How to Crowdfund Your Campaign and Win in the Digital Age. It is sponsored by CrowdPac, the Committee of 70, and Philadelphia 3.0. Again, that date is Wednesday, November 29th, 2017, from 5:30 to 8 p.m. at Pipeline, Philadelphia, located at 30 South 15th Street in Philly. Tickets are free, but you want to make sure you reserve your space. All right, that's going to do it for this edition of the People Power Lunch Hour show. I'm Vanessa Maria Graber here on Philly Cam TV and WPPM-LP Philadelphia. We'll be back next week with an all-new show. If you'd like to check out this episode and all of our episodes here at Philly Cam, you can log on to our website at phillycam.org. If you'd like to get involved in making your own independent media, we have a bunch of free information sessions coming up on the calendar. Again, go to our website at phillycam.org, sign up for a free session, and get involved. Thank you so much for listening. We'll be back next week. Stay tuned for Sprouts coming up next. Thank you.